Hello, what is up, good people of the world? It is I, Melly, and it is my co host, Maggie. And we are here with episode 5. I keep wanting to call them classes. I'm like, this is episode slash class 5 of 8 of this Celestial Essentials series. And that means we're over the hump. We are in the second half. So exciting. It feels for us right now, it's everything's rapid fire at the time of this recording. We are basically recording these like every other day. That's a little bit of a force. Tuesdays and Thursdays, but at least the middle of the week feels so charged with getting so much done. So we can have this done in time for our confluence this year, which is so exciting. So, anyway, I don't know. I said our confluence, like we own it. We don't. The confluence event. All right. Anyhow, welcome. This is super, super exciting. Today we're going to be getting into the houses. But the other reason that today is really exciting is because besides all the teasing we've been giving you about this Celestial Essentials course, which is going to be fucking awesome, which is where you can come basically take your astrological knowledge from wherever you are right now to that next level. I promise if you're at level 0, you'll bump up a good handful of levels. If you're at level 7, you'll still bump up. Wherever you are, we can support you in your journey to become a better astrologer, a more connected, a more knowledgeable, a more wise, whatever. And so that's a big part of what this course is going to do for you. And we've been sharing specifics with you, except for the timing. Dun, dun, dun. And today we are announcing those details. However, Maggie, could you just remind the good people what the details they already know about the course are?
Yeah, I'd be honored. I am so excited. This is like all I can think about. So, we're going to do live classes. We're going to gather virtually once a week for the duration of this course, where we will go through kind of step by step, walk you through the topic of the week. We're going to make you practice. We're going to make you talk to the other people in the group. And all of this is going to really solidify this foundation in your mind. We'll have intentional activities and kind of like coursework that we've put a lot of thought into. And not only like all of that goodness, but you're going to get a year subscription to Luna, this beautiful and efficient software that has changed our astrology practices forever. So, what are you waiting for? Get on the wait list.
Yes. There's also going to be a companion workbook, supplementary study materials that are all fully designed by us to supplement this course. On top of that, of course, we'll give recommendations for like favorite books and things like that that have been crucial in our learning process. But this really is a fully from us created, designed thing. And one of my favorite pieces really is too, it's going to be so heavy on the Q&A. And astrology is one of those things that we can't say it enough. You have to practice. Of course, you have to ask questions. And I also just find that people love to ask questions about whether it's themselves or something that just happened or something that happened to a celebrity or a relationship or whatever. And because we're doing this kind of like flipped classroom style where you're going to study ahead of time, listen to these episodes, have the information in your head, you're going to have the opportunity to think of those questions and come prepared. And we're going to get through as many of those as we can as you have that direct access to us. These are going to be 90-minute live calls every week. And I cannot wait. So when are they going to be, you ask? All right. Disclaimer. These dates are only relevant now for this very first cohort. So if you're listening after May 2026, please just go to our website for the most updated course information and put your earmuffs on for the next minute. But drum roll, please. I'm sure you can't actually hear that, but we will be starting on a Wednesday, May 20th, the year of our Lord, 2026. And I say it that way because I'm reading astrologer Linda Goodman's sun sign and love signs books right now. And she like writes a letter at the beginning and she signs it the year of our Lord. It made me actually laugh out loud. So anyway, astrology and the Lord get combined on this here day. Wednesday, May 20th, if you are signed up for this course, you will receive an email with all of the goodies, your 1-year membership to Luna registration, your instructions for the week, watch the first episode. If you've already watched it, probably okay to watch it again, practice. What questions do you have? And then the following week on Wednesday, May 27th, you will come for your first call, for your first 90-minute call. And then every week from May 27th, 2026 until July 22nd, 2026, we will meet. And I think that's really it. I know that the next question you have is about pricing, but that is something that you're going to pop over to the website for sure. The link that is in the show notes, that was once the wait list for all y'all that wait listed. You actually at this point have already gotten your information because that was your gift for signing up ahead of time and telling us that you were interested. But you can go to that link now and it's got all the information. You can sign up, ask us questions if you have them. What I can tell you is that the early bird pricing is good until May 6th. Okay, so until May 6th, 2026, you can take the offer that we have available right now and you could sign up. You could sign up at, 11:59 p.m. on May 19th for all I care at full price. That's fine, but you can take advantage of that early bird pricing until May 6th. Speaking of the website, by the way, it is brand new and beautiful. We launched it just a few days ago. Check that out. Give us some love, some feedback. If there's any like weird glitches going on or something, let us know. But super stoked to finally upgrade that baby. And that's it. That's all the exciting, timely announcements. Take your earmuffs off if you put them on. And let's get back into the evergreen content and into our content for today. Actually, that's a lie. We need to thank our sponsor first, Luna. If you could thank I just called you Luna. I meant to say Maggie. Maggie, could you please thank our sponsor and then we'll get rolling.
I need a moment to recover. I've always wanted that to be my name. Little Maggie just had a full-blown little kid stroke. I would love to thank Luna. One of Luna's statements, one of their brand statements is astrology is the story of your life. Luna helps you live it. And that aligns so much with what we are doing here at Celestial Curiosities. We're so proud to be sponsored by Luna, a company with, integrity and this foundation that it intentionally builds everything else upon. This is a visually stunning software with so many features. It revolutionizes your astrology practice. So we're so proud to be sponsored by Luna. We love Luna, and we know that you're going to love Luna too.
Woohoo! Perfect. Okay, I'm like, okay, so all right, all of the possible ways that I could start a sentence. Today, y'all, we will be covering all 12 of the houses of the zodiac. So you've heard us talk about the houses multiple times already. You at least have a pretty good idea of how they exist and what they look like in the chart. And so here is a chart. And we know that all of our little pie slices that are taking up their 30 degrees, the zodiac each, and they've got their landlord who's a zodiac sign, and they've got tenants or they don't have tenants. Those are the houses. Now, you've heard us use the what, how, where, right? The planets are the what of the chart. The sign is the how. How is that planet acting? Or how is it influenced? And then the houses are the where. So today we're finally going to get into that where. Another way of thinking about that what, how, and where is if the signs are the archetypes and the planets are the actors, the houses are the stage on which the story of life unfolds. So I actually, when I first started studying, I don't really do this that much now, but for a while, I don't know why I thought of it as like, I felt like I was walking in, if I walked into a warehouse and there were a bunch of stages behind curtains and you don't know what's back there, but you pull back the curtain from stage 1 and there's the stage of self, and you pull back the curtain for stage 8 and there's this more transformative kind of dark place. And I thought that, I don't know, for me that visual helped. So just throwing that out there in case that helps you too. Maggie, did you ever have a visual that you considered with like all 12 of the houses?
Yes, I'm a massage therapist, so I thought reflexology, like these different areas of the chart correspond to different areas of your life, just like different areas of your palm or your eye or your foot or your teeth correspond to different parts of your body. It's just a map, like a map of connection.
Yeah. Think maybe you mentioned that in an old episode now that I'm thinking of it, but that's cool. I like that too.
Mm.
So there are some categorizations, if you will, that the houses fall into, and some vocabulary, as astrology loves to have its own language, that we do want to make sure we cover, that are important to know, even if you don't use them all the time. Now, the angles is where we're going to start, because as we've already talked about in, I think, probably every episode so far, is the angles are extremely important. They're one of the first things that any astrologer is going to look at when interpreting a chart. So we've got the angular houses, are houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. And as previously described as well, these 4 are basically like major life pillars, right? The 1 is working with self, 4 is working with the area of home, 7 is working in the area of relationships, and then 10 is working in the area of career and public facing things, right? So you can see that those kind of cover the 4 major pillars or bases of a human life. They also, though, initiate action. If you remember from our last episode, 1, 4, 7, and 10 are also cardinal. Those are all cardinal. They relate to the starting of the seasons. So while I have never really thought about the houses in relation to the seasons like I do with the modes, that could be an interesting way to sort of parallel and remember those things. The second kind of house that we have is a succedent house. And a succedent house, that's SUCC at the beginning there. So that's like something that is succeeding something else, right? It's the second house that follows that first initiatory angular house. So those are houses 2, 5, 8, and 11. Those are our fixed signs, focused on security, sustaining resources, and personal development is the general vibe there. So very similar to the cardinal fixed mutable energy, right? Those first 4 houses initiate action, represent these really major life pillars, and then we move into these houses that are more about the security and sustaining and the personal development. I think actually that one's probably the one that resonates the most for what's sort of available in those houses and how we work with those. And then our third category of house is cadent. And those houses are 3, 6, 9, and 12. 3, 6, 9, and 12. And those are our mutable. These are focusing on learning, communication, and mental processes. So I was saying to Maggie before we hit record, I'm like, I never use the words angular, succedent, and cadent, which is fine. That's okay. Just knowing them is good because they'll come up in books and whatever. Doesn't mean that you actually have to speak that way. And my recommendation, if you're in a counseling room with a client anyway, is to never use complicated, like use as less speak first, learn how to speak English, then use the least confusing vocabulary as possible, because you really want this stuff to land with people. You don't want to confuse them anymore, make them seem dumber, like they can't understand, because that's a lot of how people already feel about astrology. But anyway, these are just words I think that are good to know, and easy connection to the cardinal fixed mutable. And we're going to dive into each one and talk about what each of them represents and how that kind of shows up in life. But before we do that, I want to speak a little bit to how I really love that the houses build upon themselves. This was one of the moments for me in learning astrology where I was like, damn, this is so much more intelligent than just like simply stars in the sky or whatever. Maggie, do me a favor and go to the infographic and scroll all the way to the bottom. So the infographic here on Luna is this second tab at the top. And then I just had her scroll down because I wanted to show y'all this interpretation representation of the chart that shows these 4 quadrants and has a slightly different shade of bluish green or whatever for each one. And then it has this description of the quadrant distribution. And often when I say that the houses build upon themselves, the way that I was taught, and which you can absolutely still do and makes a lot of sense, is it's moving from birth to death, right? Because if the horizon line over on that eastern side that determines the ascendant, that minute that you were born. If that is the sign that was on the eastern horizon, well, that's the minute you were born. Duh, it starts there. And if we move all the way around from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 12, and 12, once you get there, that's when you die. You're going to die, not at the same minute that you were born, but when you reach the end of that 12th house, sort of symbologically, what's the word that I created in the psyche scape, in the psyche scape of your life, you're coming to an end. And as you'll learn today, the 12th house has a lot to do with that. So you see how it builds in that way. And then it was also even explained, right? Like your birth, you are born, and then you learn how to be in your body, and then you're a toddler, and then you're a kid, and then you're in school, and then you learn how to have relationships, and it literally just builds intelligently like a human life evolves. But I really like how Luna breaks it down here and describes these quadrants, because it's, first of all, showing the, I think, significance of the angles, and again, how those really are these pillars of our lives, and how it contains an even amount of these houses that are relevant to that area. So we've got these 4 quadrants, which have 3 houses in each, right? And the way that Luna breaks down the definition of each of these sections builds, or sort of, I think, really nicely defines how that building energy that I'm talking about works through your human evolution. So if we look at the first quadrant in the bottom left, which starts with the ascendant up at that eastern horizon line, and then moves through houses 1, 2, and 3, this is where your learning, agency, and autonomous activity, like literally as we go through the more broken down versions for the rest of this class, you'll really see like, oh yeah, okay, my body and how I exist and how I communicate, like those are things that live in this learning how to be in one's body, essentially. Then you move into that second quadrant, which starts with the IC, the inner heaven, if you will, which represents inner empowerment and rootedness. So now we're working with houses 4, 5, and 6, and that's perfectly sort of contained in that. You've got the house of home, and then you've got this like creativity and will, and then you've got this daily work. It's perfect. It just makes good sense. Then you move into the third quadrant in that top right, which starts with the descendant. So now we're done with the bottom half of the chart, which is all about me, all about figuring out self. And now we're moving above that into relationships, which that descendant line is all about how we are in relationships. And then the next 3 houses, 7, 8, and 9, represent communion and receptivity with others. And then lastly, we get into that 4th quadrant, which starts with the midheaven, or the MC, which represents engagement with the world and public purpose. So many different ways to choose how it resonates best with you and how you want to define and describe and all of that. But that's why we're giving you as many versions of the story as we can and what works for us. And so you can say like, wow, that no matter kind of what angle you look, no pun intended actually, but which angle you look at it from, it all makes sense. And that's the intentionality, that this intentionality in particular of how the wheel builds on itself, I feel like is more of like this little known secret. You know, we're like, oh, the minute you were born, you take a picture, and then that's the moment you were born, and that's where all the planets were, and that's what they all define. And then so you act this way, and blah, 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 blah. And then, oh yeah, the 3rd house is about communication, and the 8th house is about this. But I don't know, knowing that it's really a story is, I think, makes it that much more magical. So that's my intro. That's the intro on the houses. And I think now, Maggie, whatever you want to add, and then we can start diving into each house.
Perfect. I want to bring in the connection between the signs and the houses. When I learned astrology, it was taught in a way, it was kind of vague actually. I kind of just assumed that the signs, the same definitions for the signs, would also apply to the houses, because Aries is the first sign, first house. It makes sense that it's all the same thing. And I After practicing for so many years now, I kind of think that that's a little bit detrimental because there are things in the house that are completely not connected to the sign. I think that we see a similar frequency of, like, if you could put a frequency to the topics that are involved with the Aries and involved with the first house, maybe we'd see like a similar line. But I want to emphasize just to be thinking about the houses as their own thing, not connected. I mean, they're connected. It's hard to talk about this. Am I saying it right?
No, you are. You're doing a great job. And this, I'm actually very glad you brought this up because this is something that Stephen Forrest always brings up and is like, do not conflate the two. Like, there's, in fact, I think like in the first page or first couple of pages of his kind of core book, if you will, which is The Inner Sky, he says one of the biggest mistakes that astrologers make that he hears is saying, if you're an Aries or the first house, like you just basically say those two things and then complete a sentence. And that's a big no-no because that's not true. Just because you have Aries energy and you have a planet in the first house, there's too much synthesizing that needs to occur to determine how that actually shows up. That's the whole what, how, where thing. But the frequency thing, like you said, yeah, they vibe at the same frequency. They understand each other very well, right? Like I always say that if astrology had its own chart, let's just say, then Aries would be the landlord of the first house. And some people have Aries rising. And so when I see that chart, I'm like, great, well, this is literally how it's not supposed to flow. It's just that's astrology's order, if you will. And that's the natural order of things, kind of. So yeah, the vibe is the same. They're in perfect coherence with each other, but they're utilized differently in the way that you break down the chart. So very important to mention. Yes.
I think that that is a big, people use that in pop astrology a lot. That was a big part of the astrological revival, actually. Some astrologers call it ABC astrology, where they will give the same keywords for Aries, Mars, and the first house, because then you only need to learn 12 sets of details. And while I don't know, that can make sense, that can be useful, maybe it's good for some people, we want to just be clear that we're not putting all of Aries keywords in the first house or vice versa.
Correct. Absolutely. Will you talk a little bit about, because I'm not the resident astronomer, like rotation of the earth and yeah.
Yeah. So it's the rotation of the earth that determines which houses are where, or I guess they're always in order, which signs are where in your chart. So that's why we need the birth time, the birth location, all of those pieces will give the most specific breakdown of what's where.
Yeah, the one thing that always helped me to kind of just very quickly, easily get this is somebody who was born at the exact same time in Germany as, Somalia or whatever, completely different latitude. The houses will shift. Your rising sign will be different based on that. So time and location are extremely important. And that's why when someone says, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure 9:00, I'd really rather not go with the pretty sure. Thanks. It's just not worth it potentially being wrong. One of my favorite, actually, quick stories on that, when I first started studying, I have a friend who's a twin. And I'm so fascinated by twins for many, many different reasons, different story for a different day. But I'd never met his twin before. And I asked him, like, are you and your twin, how are you guys? Like, are you similar? And he's like, we could not be more different. And I was like, cool. Do you know anything about your birth story? Like, how far apart were you? A C-section? Blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what the actual story was, but he said, we were born just a few minutes apart. And this is not always the case because I know many twins who this is not true and they are different in their own ways, whatever. But he and his twin, if I'm not mistaken, were like 3 minutes apart, and it did change their rising sign. He was late stage. I want to say it was like Capricorn or something. And then his brother was Aquarius, if I'm correct on that. And I remember, because I was so early on in my studies, being like, and like, what a cool for like that to be, because since then I've pulled up many twins charts and that's not the case. And I would have been a little more confused if it hadn't been that. I would have been like, well, I don't know, you guys have the same, yeah. now I can interpret it a lot better and differently to say like, oh, I can see how the archetypes have just shown up differently in your lives. You know, you're still your own people, you're your own individuated humans, but that was cool to see that like, and then at some point I kind of like probed him more. I'm like, tell me more about your life versus his life. And they really were so different. And that rising had such a huge piece, you know? So anyway, just saying. All right. Perfect. Well, let's start with the first house. So this stage of life, we've just walked into Melly's warehouse, and there's these 12 stages with their curtains pulled. And I imagine this first house, because it does have a little bit of that Aryan flavor, it's like a red. It's like this, whoa, something big's happening here. It's this first starting, you know, association. And we pull that curtain back, and on the stage is me. And in Maggie's, I was going to say in Maggie's foot in the reflexology, that Maggie's just there. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in that version. But anyway, it's me, period. It's the associations with the first house are our bodies, our physical health. There's, and you'll also notice as we go through that there are some houses that the same words come up a few different times, which is fine, but just to mention. But this is us. This is me. This is my personal character, my personality, my psychology. If you remember that Aries says I am from our last episode, then you can see how that frequency, why these two would connect in that way. It is an angular house, right? Kicking off this main pillar. That section we mentioned was autonomous activity and agency, right? Self. And so angular house means it's directly connected with one of the angles. And in this case, we cannot continue our evolution if we don't have a starting point. So the foundation is my soul dropped into this body. And then it's like, oh, okay, I've got arms and fingies, and I've got dark hair, and my eyes are green. And that's interesting. Let me explore self, right? We think about the ascendant, the rising sign, right? Remember that I ascribe the verb act to the ascendant. It's how we act. Like we the way that we act is through our body. It's how we move, how we emote, how we smile and act, and how the things we choose to do, the speed we choose to move at, all the things we do with our body are all related to self and how we show up in the world. So that's all first house fodder. I think I don't want to get too deep into other things. We will have an episode or a class that's all about transits and things too. But learning the definitions of the houses and really understanding what they're all about is powerful in a natal chart. Yes. I would possibly even argue more powerful when we're talking about transits. So really making sure you understand these things and know them so that when we look at how planetary transits are impacting somebody right now, you can really get into the nitty gritty, or, you know, in the future, whatever, at any specific time, you can get into the nitty gritty of what area of life one might expect to see these kinds of things happen. Because I'll say one more thing, what Maggie brought up, I'm a manifesting generator 4/6 for whatever that means to anybody. But part of that strategy of life is to be as efficient as possible. So I will look for shortcuts anywhere. And when I was first learning astrology, I was like, I did that. I was like, oh, for houses, I see the similarity between the houses and the signs. So I don't need to. And I kind of didn't take the houses as seriously. And then as I got really into my practice, I was like, shit, I need to revisit that. And I did. And it made me way better. And I often feel like if I had an opportunity area, that the house is still, I have to think a little bit more. I have to deconstruct a little bit more the sign archetype from the definitions of the house. And I'm not saying that won't always be the case, but try to learn this right from the beginning, because you're going to find it to be extremely beneficial in the practice. That's the first house. Me, my body.
I love it. I love it. You mentioned that you'll see maybe a little bit of repetition between the houses. I know health is a topic that is in more than one place. And I just want to kind of reiterate, remember how long it took astrology to evolve. Remember our first episode where there was 1500 years between the first cuneiform tablets and the tetrabiblos. Like, it's still been evolving. So various groups of people over the course of time would equate different places with different houses. And so there's an evolution that takes place. So it's just kind of like the general gist of the concept of the associations that we are providing. So let's get into the second house. The second house is a succedent house. It supports the first house. Other than that support, it has no relationship with the first house. There's no trine, no square, no sextile. And if you think about it, these things in the first house literally support our first house, our body, our personality, our identity. So what is that? What is in the second house? This is our finances. It's our assets, our resources, our possessions and property, spending and saving habits, the benefactors in our lives, like the people that give us gifts and maybe the people that we give gifts to. The statement connected to the second house or connected to Taurus too is I have. So again, it's about these tangible resources that we have that literally support our body. It's providing the foundation, the sustenance, all of the provisional things that we need in order to exist, to support our senses, our taste buds, our eardrums, all of that good stuff. Yes. And so all of that also kind of reflects our values a little bit, like what you spend your money on, that will, if you look at all your bank statements, you will get a really good sense of the kinds of things that you hold valuable.
Yes. I feel like with all the houses, you can see, I don't want to say superficial, but you can see some of these more simple sort of aspects or characteristics, definitions, whatever. And then there's always that kind of deeper level too. And cash property finances was always the first way that it was explained to me. And then as I kept learning and learning, I was like, oh, but also, let's say you've got a Chiron in the second, or like I was talking to a friend yesterday who has Jupiter and Venus conjunct in their natal by like 2 degrees in the second house. And I'm like, I would know that money and abundance and all that kind of just flows for you. It's not like, it's probably not an area of concern for you, right? So I don't want to get too deep necessarily here, but I do think examples could be helpful because all of this can sound kind of arbitrary as you're like, okay, I get it, second house is possession. So now so what does that mean if I've got a Jupiter in there or something? And again, remember, we're going to get into synthesis later, but I will say this could be just an interesting quick comparison. Jupiter conjunct Venus, the planet of luck, the greater benefic and flow and feminine. It's like, okay, so when it comes to all this stuff, you probably don't have a very tough time defining your values, probably seeing the value in yourself. That's maybe not you've got plights elsewhere in your life. And then money and those possessions and things like that. And this is a very good friend of mine. It's a very appropriate Jupiter conjunct Venus in the second house. Let's just flip that and say that you had like Chiron conjunct Pluto. Okay, you've got struggles when it comes to money. It doesn't mean, now this does not mean that you don't make money. It does not mean that you're not capable of abundance. It does mean though that it's not easeful. It doesn't just flow, and that it is probably likely that you've had to overcome some serious hurdles. Chiron there showing a wound. You probably have trouble finding the value in yourself, and so therefore defining what's valuable to. So we never want to define these things too narrowly anyway, because it's going to actually show up in everybody's life completely differently. But as we go through, I'd say if we think of any like quick examples that could help show that kind of contrast, that might be helpful too. So, awesome. All right, third house. So associations here are this is the house of communication is kind of the first thing that you'll always hear, but there's quite a few other things that come in here. So when I say communication, we're talking about sort of like any medium of consistent communication that we interact with. So think about podcasts, journals, social media, literally like the words that come out of your mouth. This is how you communicate. This is also, though, thought and perception, like how you understand things is a part of this house as well. Now, this one then gets into our siblings, relatives, friends, and neighbors, our immediate environment, and the routine interactions that we have in that environment. That then extends a little bit further out to short term travel or routine travel. So, like your daily commute or travel just again within that immediate environment. And then we get into, as we think about sort of the thought part of it too, we can rope in some of education, sort of primary education. Think of like your younger, more basic stuff. And then lastly, there's a little bit of dreams and divinations, if you will. And so if we think about Gemini, and Gemini's statement is I think, obviously that's pretty basic, and okay, well, that what does that have to do with siblings and travel and all that stuff? Sometimes it doesn't, guys. Sometimes there's just all these other things, like Maggie said, there's been this evolution. Let me make sure I get the cadent house part out before I maybe get in a little bit further. This is a cadent house, excuse me, the first of the cadent houses. So it's also mutable, and it forms a sextile to the ascendant. So we haven't had our transit episode yet, but in episode 1, we did, or class 1, we did talk about what those lines in the middle of the chart are, and you'll get to know those a little bit better. But now at least you're getting some of those terms. Okay, we're talking about different relationships that the planets have to each other, and in this case we're talking about the different relationships that just these houses have to each other. So in this house, taking into consideration how many different kind of columns things could fall under in someone's life, right? When you're doing interpretation, it's prudent to consider, oh, well, I want to assume it's communication. And like I said, that is usually the first thing most astrologers will say, house of communication. But you want to also consider, well, it could have something to do with siblings, though, or, could have something to do with routine travel. For example, I'll say, as I mentioned already now, that how powerful it is to know these definitions when it comes to transits. Let's say that you had a Mars or a Pluto or a Uranus or a Saturn, these harder planets, these serious sort of, okay, something to learn here. We're probably going to have something tough happen moving through your third house. Maybe it has something to do with communication, or maybe it's even a double whammy. Maybe you stop talking to your sibling. Maybe you get in a car wreck on your drive to work. Things like this that you'd never be able to predict, and no one's expecting you to. But it's super interesting to see, oh, well, look at how that showed up, manifested in this person's life. So that's what oh, yeah, go.
I had a client who, this is a transit. So we're looking at a bi-wheel. We've got our natal chart in the middle, and then where the planets are right now are moving around the perimeter. And she had Saturn just entered her third house. Saturn's energy is heavy. It's responsible. It's kind of obligatory. And she was just stepping into her family business. So she's learning all this information. She feels pressure around information, that she's not getting it fast enough, that she's not going to know the right thing at the right time. This is a big weight on her immediate environment at work, her daily place where she is. She feels stressed and heavy, and like she's not measuring up. And we all feel that way at different times, but it's interesting to look at our chart and see what's happening.
Love that. Great example. Cool. Take us into the fourth.
All right. Fourth house. This is an angular house again. So this is where back to the cardinal, back to the shares, Aries is first. Now we're at the fourth, at the bottom of the chart. This forms a square with the rising sign. So a little bit more of a frictitious kind of an energy. I don't know if that's a word, but we're going to roll with it like it is. These can just be at odds with each other a little bit. And I feel like as we grow up, a lot of us do experience being at odds with the roots of our existence, because we're flexing our own muscles. We're spreading ourselves out and figuring out, kind of what our boundaries are. Associations with this house are the foundations, the roots of our very existence, our home. That's a big one connected. I feel like people know that first. Our current home, our childhood home. our ancestry, kind of like our lineage of all the people that were before us that are kind of within us a little bit as well. Inheritance, parents. Some astrologers equate this with mother energy. Some astrologers equate it with father energy. You just kind of have to see what feels prudent to you. To me, it feels like mother, because it feels like the private life, like the nurturing spot. Like you go home and close your door at the end of the day and the world's out and you're safe and sound and cozy inside. This also has to do with the emotional baseline in our private life. All of that kind of, like I said, you come home at the end of the day, you close the door, and you are separated from your public representation. You get to just be contained in your baseline and who you are, your private life. This is also kind of along with that, things that are hidden from the public, but not from you. So things that you're aware of, maybe it's an emotional thing, maybe it's a pattern or a habit. You're well aware that it's there, but maybe we try to make sure that the outside world doesn't know. The statement for the fourth house is I feel.
Which is related to Cancer.
Yes, ma'am. When Uranus transits this house, you're more likely to move. And it's a slow transit. So
yeah, that is one that I want to share that I just actually had this reading last week. And in my preparation, this woman, I don't remember if I mentioned this to you. I almost sent you a screenshot of this, but I knew you were busy, so I think I didn't. She has Pluto and Mars exactly conjunct to the minute, which is like so rare to see, exactly conjunct to the minute on. So her IC was actually a little bit off to the right, but because we're in whole sign, it was exactly at the perfect bottom of the chart in Scorpio.
oh,
So, oh my gosh, I was just like, bleh, 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 like just get like hit over the head multiple times with a hammer. I'm like, okay, interesting. I am very curious. The first thing that came to my mind was didn't even go straight to home like my current home. It went straight to roots. I was like, this woman is going to have a deep connection to lineage or, something around ancestry, because this is the deep stuff. This is the let's get in there stuff, right? No matter what, in some way, it's going to represent home life currently now and private life, whatever. And then also, I was like, she's going to be, and what was cool too was I think she was a Leo rising and had a couple of other placements that were like, ta-da! Like I also am like this charming, Gemini moon. It was Leo rising, Gemini moon. Can't remember her sun right now. Anyway, so I was like, oh, this is so fascinating, right? Like I know she's got this really, really private, like deep, kind of dark side of her, but I just intuitively thought lineage, right? And her roots. And in the first few minutes, she just started talking first and wanted to share with me why she was excited to do the reading, whatever. And within the first 2 minutes, I just had the biggest smile on my face. I really actually want to go back and watch the recording, because she's like, and she's a Gemini moon. So, she's just like riffing, and she's like looking off to the side, and she's like, and I'm like really interested to understand how astrology connects us to our lineage. And she starts talking about like ancestry. And I was like, just so perfect, and the chart always shows itself in different ways, not within the first 2 minutes and not that clearly, but also for a conjunction to be exactly to the minute, you guys, that's like literally Siamese twins. Like there's no disconnection from Mars and Pluto, and that it was so strong. And yeah, and she just had this depth of like wanting to understand. She had this fire around it too. It was so cool. So yeah, that's my fourth house story for you.
I love that.
All right, moving on to the fifth house. Move our curtain to the side, look on the stage, and what do we find? Well, first of all, this is a succeed. I keep wanting to say succeedant, but I know it's succeedant. Whatever, guys, I'm going to pronounce it however the hell it comes out of my mouth. Okay. This is also a succeedant house. It is succeeding the fourth house now. So it's in support of a different house, but this also now has a different relationship that it's making geometrically, mathematically, from that house to the first house, to the ascendant. And that is that it is forming a trine aspect. So we're looking at the same element. And we're looking at this. This is a fixed modality since it's in that succedent house. And this particular one being the fifth house, it corresponds with the fifth sign, Leo, whose statement is I create or I will. So we've pulled the curtain back, and on the stage, we find our creativity and creations. So, what is like one of the most incredible things anybody can create in the human nature, and well, really like the whole animal kingdom, but is babies. We can create another human. We can and that is, some people would argue the most, sacred. I think most people shouldn't even try to argue with that, the most sacred kind of creation. So it goes that deep. And I like to mention that because when we think about creation, I think we think about art and all that, which does fall here too. But this is also the house of childhood. And so it helps me to remember, like, oh, this is going like all the way from the idea of child creation, childbearing, child rearing, being a child, having joy and just fun and free spirited. And then also, if you just relate that to creations, being creative, you just, pick up a paintbrush or, do pottery or whatever myriad different kinds of artistic things there are to do. That's typically a more free form, flowy, it's like an artistic, fun, creative thing, which falls all under that same thing. Some other keywords here: games, hobbies, gambling. And another thing that falls in here is dating, romance, and sex. So in more traditional astrology, this used to be called the house of love affairs. And so it kind of, like, the way we think of love affairs, that sounds negative, like this is a secondary thing that's occurring. But actually, if you just think about the definition of a love affair, if I was not married and I was just having a fling with somebody, that's its own love affair as well. And so there's a distinct difference between relationship that occurs in the fifth house, which is just for fun and just, I'm just romancing and all that. And then when we get into the seventh house, which is the traditional house that people think of for that, that's sex. That's intimacy. This is just sex. This is a different story. This is a little more just surface level, if you will. Still fun though. So all of that falls into this fifth house, and fertility as well. And if you think about too, like building your home in the fourth house and thinking about all that lineage stuff and all of that, having this safe place, this private place, like Maggie said, where you can close the door and be comfortable on your own and just like be with yourself in order to then rear a child. I think this feels very resonant for me because I'm going through this in my life. Creating safety and security in your home space first is, I think, the ideal evolution. It's not always the case, of course. That doesn't mean you can't get pregnant without that. But if we're trying to have a conscious evolution through life, I do think that that's the pragmatic way to go about it. So that's the fifth house.
That really highlights how it all builds on each other so beautifully. It's crazy. It's like, I don't know. It's crazy. Such a good math problem.
It's a little exhausting in my current lifescape. My current psychescape is like, hey, but yes, I agree. All right. Sixth house.
Okay. Sixth house. This is like halfway through. This is a cadent house. So it is preceding an angular house. It's coming before. It is connected to Virgo, sixth house, sixth sign. What Virgo says is I analyze. So things associated with this house are our daily things, our daily routines, kind of like the mundane, all of the mundane tasks that stack up and ultimately shape our everyday. What does that also affect? That also affects our vitality, our physical health, all of the things that you do day after day after day. Huge effect on your illness, your sickness, your health levels, your vitality, all of that part of you is also connected with the physical labor that we do as part of our job that falls into that daily task kind of a category. And then also in older styles of astrology, this was like subordinates. So you could think of this as pets, employees, or like service people that you like your massage therapist, your house cleaner, all of those people that you employ. They're not beneath you, but they're just looking to you for, you know, whatever.
Just whatever. Maybe
You do
that'll
that
be a new
so
thing.
well.
Whatever. Yeah. I'm actually have a friend who used to say that all the time, and I would make fun of her. I think I probably practiced enough making fun of her that now my how the tables have turned. Yeah, I feel like it took me a long time to feel like I kind of got the sixth house, and which really kind of drove me crazy because I have Jupiter in Taurus in my sixth house, and I'm like, and Jupiter is my chart ruler. I'm like, shouldn't I feel more connected to this? And as I get older, I'm like, oh, okay.
There it is.
See how I ignored this. And you know, for edification's sake, why I say that, and again, this will come way more in chart synthesis that we'll have this conversation, but your chart ruler or the planet that rules any sign is kind of, it's, I like to think of it as the coach. So right, if I'm a Sagittarius rising and Jupiter's the ruler of Sagittarius, which means it's my chart ruler, then even though Sag is fiery and all these things, it's peeking over at its coach. It's looking at Jupiter, who's sitting in Taurus, and is like, hey, kind of, what am I doing? What play are we running right now? And Taurus is like the bull. He's just sitting there like, we will wait, my son. And fiery Sagittarius is like, we will not wait. And I think that I let a lot of my fire rule me for like the majority of my life. And I was like, I'm not listening to the coach, which by the way is basically how I go by real life too. I'm like, I refuse to have a coach. Funny enough, my dad is a tennis coach, and I would like, no, nope. I will not listen to you and what you tell me to do as your daughter or nor as your tennis student ever. And it's kind of funny to think of it this way, right? And it's also this stubbornness. So in some way I'm showing that sort of lower vibration or that pitfall of that Jupiterian energy. But then also, if we think about the overindulgent side of Jupiter and the too much, and we think about the daily routine, and we think about illnesses and health, I have been on quite the effing health journey. And guess what's been moving through that house for me for the last 7-8 years? Uranus, just disrupting the shit out of everything. And I have felt it. So just so you guys know, at this current moment, it's about to leave. This is its last month. Bye-bye. I'm very ready for you to go. And it's been interesting that's the kind of synthesis you can do. There's so many different ways where it's like, oh, I can see how natally that presented. And if I had known earlier in my life what to do with that, maybe to be like, hey, that stubbornness, it's okay to feel that. But also there's this like really lucky beneficial energy available to you from Jupiter too. Do we want to maybe try and tap into that a little bit more? Right. I probably would have said no, but that's fine. So anyway, that's the end of the sixth house, which means it's the end of the bottom of the chart. So now we are entering the top of the horizon line. We just went through that section that Luna described as, I think, was it empowerment? I actually really liked those descriptions. I want to mention them one more time.
Inner empowerment and rootedness.
Inner empowerment and rootedness. And now we're going into this next section for these next 3 houses in that quadrant. That's the first above the horizon. And that's going to be where we're looking at communion and receptivity. So think about the word communion versus all that fun, sexy, romantic time I was having in the 5th house. Now I'm moving into this 7th house where we're more in communion. That's like a way deeper word. They use that word in church. Okay. So this is serious. First, though, this is an angular house related to the 7th house, related to Libra. Now, this is opposing the ascendant, right? So we call the ascendant, descendant line or axis. It's that angle we use the word axis for as well. So you know it's always going to be exactly opposite. And there's always this tension of opposites, if you will, of pulling on one side, pulling on the other. In this case, when we look at the axis, it's simply we're looking at I versus we. But then we are going to look at those energies. And in this case, you know, Aries, Libra being the usual, we're looking at I am versus I balance. I am versus I balance. Because when you're in relationship, when you're in partnership, when all these things I'm about to talk about, you have to learn how to balance those things between self and other. It's literally one of the, I would say, most frustrating and hardest lessons that people have to learn in life, to not let themselves get too lost, not to get too lost in others, blah, 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 blah.
It's all very
So
slippery.
say it
It's not
again.
like it's all very slippery. It's not like there's like a bumper pad or, you know, like one of those parking spot things that prevent you from going further. No, it's a slip and slide. Yeah.
A parking stop.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what are the associations with the seventh house is the other in relation to ourselves. So it's not just the other, it's how we relate to the other. And some others that we relate to are our past life known people. And some of the people who we relate to are people who we would really love to never have to relate to. If it were up to us, we would never talk to that person again. But because of work or family or whatever it is, you must. And so, how can you balance yourself in relation to others? This also then encompasses our sexual partners, relationships, marriages, our marriage partner, and sometimes even our public enemies. But if you were to ask, I would say the majority of astrologers, hey, give me like the number one keyword when you think of each house, probably the house of marriage would be one of the, especially for more traditional astrologers, that would come up for the seventh house. I think that I would say partnership. I think that probably when I was first learning, I would have said marriage. And then the more and more I've gotten into it, really is partnership, especially because like I'm thinking of one client and friend who I have who has this extremely successful business. And in the last couple of years, she went through a divorce. And then she also, her business, divorce, not so good, business going through its own struggles, but mostly like going upwards, upwards trajectory. And so it's actually really interesting for me to consider, okay, well, she's got this business partner who co-runs this business same way that you and I do, 50-50. And then she's got this other thing that's crumbling over here. No, the complexity, right? Because in the foundation of the relationships, I can see how they present the way that they present. And I can see how that's pretty clear. But then that doesn't mean that they're going to take the exact same paths, but it's important to consider that it's not just the marriage. That's very simple. You can feel like you're married to somebody who you're in business with. And so kind of that feel. Stephen Forrest says these are the people, the way he describes it, I think it's a little loose, but I think it still hits, which is this is the house, think of the people who are going to be at your funeral, like, are going to be at your funeral and you're going to be at theirs. Those people who are your people, your core people. Those are kind of like your seventh house people versus like just your acquaintances kind of thing.
Your fling or your one night stand probably wouldn't be at your funeral.
Probably not. Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
So seventh house, that is what I've got.
Perfect. That takes us right into the eighth house. Scorpio is the eighth sign. So we see a lot of the similarities between Scorpio and the eighth house. This is a succedent house. So it is coming after one of the angular houses, and it doesn't have any other relationship to an angle. The statement for the eighth house is I desire, and some of the associations connected with this house. I have always had kind of a tough time with this house. I have to use other things to help me like make sense of it. I think of it as the opposite end of the second house spectrum. So if the second house is your personal belongings, the eighth house is the resources that you share with others. And that is, we can extrapolate that out really big. You can think about like your body is a resource that you borrow. So we get into that, like the death and rebirth and loans, taxes, borrowing things from other people, borrowed money, things that are taboo or hidden. I get that because the ascendant has no relationship with it. So if the ascendant can't see it, it's probably hidden. It's probably a little bit under the surface. It's probably just a little bit more private and something we want to keep maybe to ourselves.
Yeah. I think, I would agree with that.
Mm.
But I think that I always think of this, and I feel like maybe I learned this in one of my first trainings, but I don't know. There's also possible that I sort of just thought of this myself. Whatever. If I'm supposed to give somebody credit, I'm sorry. But sex, drugs, and rock and roll are one of the things that I think of for the eighth house. And it's because it's all that taboo stuff. It's like the things that we're supposed to not talk about, but also like they're a part of they're like an important part of the human experience to experience that stuff. No, I'm not saying you should go out and do a line of coke. I'm just saying that it's these, like Maggie said, like if you are out there doing all this kind of stuff, you're probably not talking about it if you've taken it to an extreme. This can also be extremes, again, related to Scorpio, right? And the transformative aspect here, where we're talking about like the spirit work and potentially things like mediumship and all, I think that piece of it feels really clear to me because of the transformative aspect of that eighth house, of knowing if I see a lot of activity in the eighth, I know that probably I can get some pretty like dark humor across to this person comfortably. And I know also that they've probably learned some really hard lessons in some deep ways. Like shit goes down for them and they face it, kind of head on. So
Yeah,
those are
like
some thoughts I have.
major shedding in your life.
Yeah. Snake
Mm.
energy for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Amen.
Amen. All right, moving on to the ninth house. This is another cadent house. This forms a trine with the ascendant yet again. And it's also like getting really to that top of the chart. So you've got like the most light up here, the most sun. We're coming out of this darkness of the eighth and coming out from a building blocks perspective. If you go from I desire, which was for the eighth house, and also think of like these darker, more transformative kind of aspects there, and then you come into the light, I see or I perceive, like what have you learned there, and then now what are you taking and how can you build further upon that? And the ninth house is related to Sagittarius, which is where I see or I perceive comes from, as a reminder. And that trine to the ascendant it's considered an easeful relationship that it's having there, so very supportive. The associations with the ninth house are long distance or rare travel, like pilgrimages, vacations, etc., journeys, if you will. I love a good journey. Uh, Adventure, foreign lands, foreigners, foreign ideas. It also is the house of religion, philosophy, spiritual beliefs, spiritual quests, and then also scholars, philosophers, universities, counselors, advisors, one-off publications. So we're giving you a lot to think of. When I first learned, I believe it was higher education. Like if we had to just give it something simple, it's higher education. But I don't know, oversimplifying it and teaching it that way doesn't feel as good, because I think it immediately dampens the curiosity available, because then you just think, oh, okay, it's higher education. And you can be like, well, okay, so that's like universities, and you can see how like religion and philosophy fall into higher education, but it's also all this other stuff. And so I prefer sort of throwing it all out there and like what sticks for you, like the word foreign is just such like, I don't know, there's something exciting about that word for me that I'm like, oh, I want to get into the foreign stuff. What's going on in my ninth house? And my ninth house is actually empty. And my ninth house is ruled by Leo. I personally think I have a lot of Leonian aspects to me, probably because it's my only missing, like I don't have any placements there, but I have the other fire signs. It's like almost like the missing element. I've got this like missing sign that I'm like, I want to be like Leo. But if you think about all the Leo, the fun and the way that Leo wants to express and is very proud and confident in the way that it does, ninth house stuff, like let's go when it comes to especially the philosophy and religion stuff. I'm so fascinated. Like I will have a conversation about spirituality and foreign ideas, foreign to me, and literal foreign things, religion versus spirituality, the great philosophers, all that stuff, all day, all day. Also, travel is like one of my absolute favorite things to do. And you can get me on a plane like this. If I've never been there before, especially like give me the opportunity for a new quest. And I'm like, let's go. Now, what's interesting, right? But wait, Melly, you just said you have nothing in your ninth house. Okay, so some of that Leonian energy for sure still rules my ninth house. So it brings that in. But there is still this relationship. A lot of this stuff does have crossover to my Sagittarius rising. So, not to muddy the things up, but just to, see in real life that it's not always easy to just separate the things, but you can, with proper synthesis, pay attention and say, okay, well, I can see how maybe I don't see it there in the house as much, but this person is a Sagittarius rising. So, of course, they're going to show up with a lot of that kind of ninth house energy.
I love that.
Cool beans.
After we have the ninth house, we get into the 10th. This is crossing over into the last quadrant that we saw in that nice pie chart from Luna. This represents engagement with the world and public purpose. So it's kind of like, what you put out into the world, your public reputation, all that good stuff. This is an angular house, the last of the angular houses. It's again squares the rising sign. And so we have the private life and the public life squaring the rising sign. Both, this is a lot of times where we get into conflict in our own lives, no matter what they look like. This statement for the 10th house, which is connected to Capricorn being the 10th sign of the zodiac, is I use. And I've already mentioned some of the associations connected with this area of the chart. This is our vocation, our trade, our reputation, how the public sees us, like the role that we play in the world for the public, what people think of when they think of us, our status, our dignity, professional identity, all of that kind of more outward facing stuff that describes the role that we play in this world. Also can get into like superiors and authority figures and how you relate with that, how you accept that, all that good kind of stuff.
Yes, the 10th. I'd love to give an example here too. You and I have the same, we both have Libra ruling our 10th house. I only have my midheaven there. You have midheaven and moon.
And Jupiter.
I was like, wait, of course, how I can never forget that you have Jupiter conjunct the moon. And if you guys don't know, it's because Maggie has a niece named Riley who also has Jupiter conjunct the moon, and her mom also has Jupiter conjunct the moon. Everybody has Jupiter conjunct the moon.
Okay. An astounding memory. Thank you.
I do have a little bit of an elephant memory. However, an example that came up recently in my life, because Jupiter in Libra's opposite of Aries. I have strong Aries energy. So I've never really considered myself to have a lot of Libran energy. But if my midheaven's there, then obviously, yes, I do. And it's also how I'm perceived and seen as others, because that's like that public facing, right? Well, recently I had a friend who was going through a situation with a mutual friend of ours, and it was getting a little hot and heavy. And she has a very similar energy to me. She's got a lot of Aries. And so she came to me and literally the words she used is that she was seeking my counsel just to be an impartial person who she knew she could count on to sort of help her see both sides of what she was thinking, what he was saying and thinking, how that was all coming together. And then to help her determine, like, am I moving forward in a way that feels like it makes sense? Or like, what would you recommend? Or and I actually think she said, like, what do you see that I'm not seeing? Because I really do want to approach this in a way that's as balanced as possible, and that like things end up in a positive way. And all of that I just said is like a really great looking of how somebody else saw that more Libran, that ability to mediate, to balance, to see those sides, and to help to sort of bring the peace and the harmony to the situation, which I thought was really, really kind of cool.
And people ask you for just advice on relationships often. Like you've gotten that many times from many different people.
That's true. Yeah, the relationship specifically, that aspect of it is a good point. Yeah, my whole life, people have always, like, I feel like people were asking me for advice when like I was a baby. I was like, what are you asking me for? Except for I'd be like confidently like, I do know the answer though. And I don't know why, but I know it. So whatever. All right. To the 11th house, where we are at our final succedent house, our final supporting house. And this house forms a sextile relationship to the ascendant. I don't know if we've actually said out loud that a sextile is sort of like a mini trine in its own way. It's considered a more easeful relationship between two planets. They understand each other to a certain extent. This house is associated with Aquarius, and Aquarius says, I know. Just have that reminder. The associations here are our friends, our allies, benefactors, networks, communities, audiences, hopes and desires for the future, and benefits from our profession. So breaking that down a little bit more, the friends, allies, that part, that when I was saying the like people who you end up at their funeral or they end up at yours, like the people who really matter, that would not be here, right? Because let's just say that you are in this community that's really important to you, that, you know, especially in this day and age of social media and stuff like that, you could be in a community that has hundreds of people in it. You could go to a Joe Dispenza retreat with 2,000 people, a Tony Robbins retreat with 10,000, you know, that kind of thing. And you'll meet a few people there who maybe you create a friendship with, but that energy wouldn't have been the same without all the bodies and energy that were there. That community was created by every single soul and vibration that was in the room. So that community, all those people are not going to your funeral. I'm sorry to report to you. This is a good kind of example to contrast from the kinds of friendships that we're talking about here to the kinds of partnerships or relationships we're talking about over in the seventh. Now, it doesn't have to be that grandiose. I was obviously being just a little bit exaggerative, but when we think about also, you know, church and the places that are your consistent communities and networks that are in support to you, if you've got business networks that are, you know, crucial to your running your business or whatever it is, all of that would fall here. You would look here for that. And I often see, when I see a lot of 11th house energy for people, this is an interesting one where kind of we go back to the example that I gave of the woman who had the really private kind of her life, but also had this need for being out there. There often is, because all of this is within us, right? That we have this need for community, etc. But we also kind of have like, but I also want to go like be in a cave by myself and not talk to anybody. How do we, and in fact, I think you have a little bit of that in, I don't remember what you have. What do you have in the 11th? What do you have in Aquarius? Do you have anything?
In Placidus, I have Sun, Pluto, but in whole sign, that's in my 12th house.
Yeah, in whole sign, you don't have anything. Well, maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. But recently, actually, because I am a big community person, I love being in all sorts of different communities and connection and all these things. And I'm in communities of all different sizes. And I've got some crossover in some of these communities. So I've got one where we've got like maybe a dozen people or so, and then another that's got like over 100. And I've got a few people who are in both of those. And some of those people are like, I'm happier in this smaller community. It's more my speed. I like intimacy versus big. And it's so fun to see that. And then the person I'm thinking of, I have not actually seen her chart, but if I were to look at her chart, let's just say that she had some sort of 11th house energy that showed like, oh, you've got clearly communities are important to you in some way and are crucial to your sanity to like be involved. Cause you've got maybe, you know, you're attracted to communities and maybe let's say you've got like Mars and or Venus or something like that, that just shows 11th house is something that personally like you should pay attention to. And then you could look at somebody else right on the side who has the exact same placements as her or very similar, who doesn't love the intimate setting. They want the big, more exciting event or more exciting, full of more people, and they want to be involved in more things. So this is one for me, I will say, where I leave the door pretty open. And I think I often am interested in hearing collaboratively how communities are, how friendships, et cetera, in somebody's life, because this would not be one you could never predict what kind of relationship they have with this area. You know, some I think they're a little bit more easy to be like, oh yeah, when we're looking at business partnership or whatever it is. But would you agree with that? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Yay. On to the very final house.
Well, this is the 12th house, and This is our last cadent house. It really has no relationship with the rising sign other than sitting right on top of it. It is connected to Pisces. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, and Pisces says, I believe. So some of the keywords connected with this part of the chart are our perception of loss or suffering. So that sounds really scary right out of the gate. A lot of times that's tough for us to see when we're in it, or it like clouds our judgment, or it just, we have to do a little bit of self-undoing when we're here, when we're having transits through this area, when this part of our chart is being activated by different planets. Sometimes it's connected to like seclusion, like where we're being locked away. I think of like prisons, hospitals, or just things where you're kind of removed from the group. Seclusion, isolation, phobias, things that are hidden from self and public. So we get into this psychological territory where all of it's opposite of our sixth house, right? Which is our daily tasks and routines that shape our physical vitality. This is kind of the opposite. It's the things that are around us, the people that are around us, the toxins that are around us, everything that is around us that is contributing to our mental health, to whether or not we're suffering, to whether or not we're seeing a really clear picture of what reality is, or are we lacking a real grip on what is real and just suffering unnecessarily? Because a lot of times, like, you don't need to suffer unnecessarily, but a lot of times we do. So
Well, we could argue that sometimes we need to go through that suffering to
yes.
learn whatever the hell. But, when you said earlier for the fourth house, this is where you're in private and you're hidden. And this is though where things are not, how did you say it? You said that's where you
hidden from the public, but not from you.
Correct. And here, this is not the same. This is distinct, where this is hidden from you. This not completely and not all the time, but this is, I feel like the fourth house is more the intentional privacy. Hey, I'm closing the door and I just want to refuel in privacy. This is like, it's more of a healthy, I would say, almost hidden. Here, you're more likely to, as we've talked about, the junk drawer or the backstage. There's the connotation I use for backstage. I actually feel very good about. This is all the inner work that you do to make sure that the outer work is functioning and everything's going the way it's supposed to, and everyone's on their mark where they're supposed to be, and it goes on time and all of that. The junk drawer, though, this is the perk and the pitfall kind of thing. On the pitfall side of that, you throw all the shit in there and that can end up looking like major escapism. This can be you hiding from the things that you don't want to take accountability for, that you don't want to face head on. But then when you do choose to face that shit head on, then you're in that more spiritual side of the 12th house territory. So it's kind of all of that. I think your description was great. I also thought when you said the fourth house thing, I was like, ooh, I wonder if she's going to say the opposite for the 12th.
I want to say, like, the 12th house, the 8th house, people always get a little bit like when we talk about it, because this is suffering, this is loss, this is like intentionally killing off versions of yourself in order to grow. And that's psychologically just a little bit more unsettling than some of the other topics we've talked about today. And I just want to point out that in whole sign, my sun and Pluto are in my 12th house, and I'm not in jail. I'm not in a hospital. I'm not like in a psych ward. So I just want to say that, like, I feel like I'm a pretty optimistic person. So just to kind of, I don't know, put you at ease, if you heard me say, this is the house of suffering, and you're like, you're going to be fine. It's not about.
Yeah, for sure. And also just two things. One, your Sagittarius rising, of course, is going to bring that optimism, but you are not afraid to face the depths. You're not afraid to face the yucky stuff too, which I think is really important. Now, that does not always mean that you're in suffering, right? But yeah, it's nice of Maggie to tell you you're not going to be just in suffering all the time, but like, you're going to suffer. We all do. And we need to not be afraid of that. And we need to be okay with that. And actually, we had a conversation in book club yesterday that was super resonant with this. There were these questions that were posed in Women Who Run with the Wolves. We're getting to the very end here, and there's a famous myth that is really detailed. It gets into a lot of, there's these 7 different phases, and anyway, it's called the Handless Maiden, in case you've heard of it. I won't get into all the details. However, one of the questions that the author posed was, when we're going into our descent into the underworld, as we're talking about it there, and this is talking about the psyche going into some sort of, like you just said, death and rebirth cycle, then do we have a choice in going? Do we have a choice in going or staying? And this opened up a really beautiful discussion in the group, because I was like, damn, especially myself, having been through what I've been through this year, 2026, the year of our Lord has been quite a year. And I think that I chose to go into it because I knew that I had to. It was almost like I didn't have another choice, actually. Then another woman in the club came in and said, well, I hear that. And she's like, I remember being, and she was talking about many years past, like 10 years ago, whatever. She's like, I remember hearing about these kinds of dark nights of the soul and, dying and being reborn and the psychological. And she was like, I remember distinctly being like, I'm good, thanks. I don't want to do that. Like she didn't. So she avoided doing anything like that. She's like, I don't know that my life was any worse for, that or anything. And at some point, then she did choose the route of being now then interested in that stuff. I mean, I went through the same thing. At some point, I made the choice to not do, or we're always making the choice, right? Then it got into a really interesting conversation around choice versus consequences. Well, when you make the choice, you don't know all of the potential consequences, but you kind of have to be prepared for all of them. And we in life these days, culturally, societally, in our family units, based on what our parents were taught and all these things, we're not prepared for all the consequences. We're not told to be, we're not taught how to be. It's just, there's this desire to achieve happiness and wellness. All these things are great. It is 1000% unrealistic. And astrology reminds us of that we will have the good, we will have the bad. Let's just call it that. As much as I don't like to live in a good, bad, right, wrong, life will throw all of that shit at you. But this shows you how balanced it is, that you'll ebb and flow through them all, like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. You will shed, you will be reborn into something new. There's a million different ancient symbols, myths, etc., that can remind you, like, this too shall pass. Wow, I am like on my biblical tip today.
Girl, I think we should get a Amen.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
That was my first time singing to you.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to record that. It's going to be your ringtone now.
Please
All
no.
right. Can you imagine every time you call? It's that would be amazing. All right. That is it. That's it for the houses. That's a wrap for class numero 5. Thank you for being here in Celestial Essentials. Hopefully you are joining us on our journey to be Q&Ing and laughing and doing all things with you live. And if you're not, screw you. But also, I hope you're learning a lot. And I think that's it. I think that's all I have for the moment. We're super grateful to you guys. We're super grateful to Luna. As you guys know, I know we didn't have it up on the screen all too much today. That's okay. You're going to get plenty of practice in it in the program. Remember, you get 1 year membership included with your tuition. It's a very angelic moment for us all. Oh my goodness gracious. By the way, I'm sorry, but am I just like, am I Native American? Is it not okay for me to say that out loud? These are freaking magic. I love
They're
that.
so pretty. It makes me want to make things.
I know. I want to make things all the time. We actually sold our dining room table. We didn't sell it. We gave it away on like a free Facebook marketplace or whatever. But the woman who took it is going to reupholster the seats, and she's going to completely redo the table. I was like, please send me the photo when you do, because I only have been saying for the last 2 years since we bought that used that it's all scuffed and stuff. I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. I'm not getting chalk paint, and I'm not listening to music and paint. I'm not doing it. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I won't. I'll take that off our calendar.
We have to go. I have to go. All right.
Okay. Love you.
Love you guys. Until next time, stay
Stay curious.
Yay. Did I go too hard at the end there? It was a little too
No.
much.
Are you serious?
No, I'm not serious.
Okay. I was gonna punch you through the screen.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, love you. Have a good day.